As I'm sure you know, somewhat recently Borrowed Time became base kit for all survivors, with Borrowed Time the perk itself now simply extending the duration by an extra 10 seconds. Overall, it seems the majority of the community are either really happy about this change, or at the worst they're not bothered either way. Most Survivor players, whether high tier or low tier, never really like being tunneled, so of course—
Here's the issue, and he's probably gonna talk about this, but here's the issue. The problem with like current BT, like having BT be base kit is great because it's like, it's better than nothing. It's one of those things where it's like, it's better than nothing, right? It's better than not having anything. But like, if you come like right up on hook and just hit them immediately, it's like, it's not really a true like anti-tunnel measure. Because if they come up right, if they back to Candy like somebody Killer 7, they just like smack you immediately. It's like, you know, it's essentially as if you had nothing anyway. So it's like, I don't know. It's better than nothing, but it's not like a solution, if that makes sense.
Having an anti-tunnel mechanic now built into the game is hugely appreciated, and a lot of hardcore killer players refuse to tunnel anyway. Of course, I'm not saying that every single Dead by—
Yeah? A lot of hardcore killer players refuse to tunnel anyway. That's a sentence. A lot of hardcore killer mains refuse to tunnel anyway. Can I go to his MMR? Can I go to his group of people? Can I have his killers? Because that sounds great. That sounds like the kind of players I want to be going up against. That's not what I get. I get people that want to tunnel almost every game. What is going on? Can I have your gamers?
By Daylight player is okay with it, but overall it doesn't seem to be that controversial of a change, because most people agreed Borrowed Time was a fair perk that was healthy for the game.
Yep.
However, I'm sure a lot of you watching don't know that once upon a time, this change would have meant the death of Dead by Daylight, as many years ago Borrowed Time was actually overpowered, often being in the same class as Decisive Strike and Unbreakable.
Really?
I know that sounds absolutely crazy to hear in 2022, and no doubt many of you are thinking, how could Borrowed Time ever be overpowered? Just don't tunnel. But many moons ago, Borrowed Time did more than just prevent tunneling. Let me explain to you how Borrowed Time fell from greatness, from overpowered to base kit. All the way back in February of 2017, Dead by Daylight had just made a legendary crossover, as I had just bought the game. Jokes aside, they had a crossover with Left 4 Dead, adding a Rochelle outfit for Claudette, an Ellis outfit for Dwight, a Francis outfit for Jake, alongside Bill. Not an outfit, just straight up Bill. In patch 1.4.2, this Left 4 Dead crossover was added alongside Bill's perks. Left Behind, which increased your generator repair speed by 25% per remaining generator if you were the last survivor alive, which has recently been moved to Sole Survivor for Laurie Strode. Unbreakable, which had the same effects as it has today, just with 25% bonus recovery speed instead of its current 35%, and Borrowed Time. I think Borrowed Time was always intended to be an anti-tunnel perk, but upon its initial release, it was more of an anti-losing perk. When unhooking a survivor, the unhooked survivor would be granted the endurance effect for 20 seconds. If a survivor takes damage that would otherwise put them in the down state, whether this be a basic attack or a chainsaw, they would instead get an on-hit burst and start a 40-second timer. Once the 40 seconds was over, they would go down. This perk would only trigger if the unhook was within the killer's terror radius. So far, nothing too crazy, right?
Yeah.
Very similar to the modern day's Deep Wounds version, just with a slightly longer window to trigger it, and the timer doesn't pause while sprinting.
Yeah.
Healing once removes the timer but keeps you injured, and then you could just heal a second time to go back to full. However, since it counted as a regular heal and not mending, you needed teammates to do it if you didn't have self-care or a medkit.
Yeah.
And of course, it could be sped up with perks and medkit add-ons. So, how on earth could that be unfair? Well, I left out one key piece of information. Borrowed Time would also apply to the unhooker. Not a weaker version or one with different mechanics. No, you straight up got the exact same effect.
So, either you tunnel and you're bad and you have to eat the BT, or you decide to be a good boy and not tunnel and hit the other person and you're still bad. Even if you try to be nice and not terrible, you still get punished? Oh my god. Oh, that's terrible. That's awful. That's literally darned if you do and darned if you don't. There is no winning there. How did they think that was a good idea? Oh Oh my god.
Using borrowed time put the killer in a lose-lose situation. Try and tunnel the hooked survivor and you'll have
Yeah, you're right, Matt, because I encourage just tunneling more because I might as well just go after the person that I'm going to 3-hook and make the game a victory rather than rather than going after the other guy who, you know, I'm going to have to start their whole hook process with them instead of just, you know, after going through all that BT nonsense, actually getting something for it.
Same problems that modern borrowed time gives you. So instead, you don't tunnel and go for the unhooker, and same problem. Except this time, you'd have to go through 3 entire health states, alongside dealing with on-hit bursts. The attempt at balancing it was that borrowed time had a single stack instead of its modern day infinite uses. To put this into perspective, each time somebody got unhooked, half of the lobby would be effectively unkillable for a short while.
Yeah, which is
the
dumb.
weird thing is, due to this effect also going onto the unhooker, who could be at full health, the perk functioned less like an anti-tunnel perk and more of a pro-tunnel perk. Since if the killer went for the person who just got unhooked, they'd only have to hit them twice, but if they went for the unhooker, that's 3 entire hits they'd have to work through.
Yeah, because they'd be healthy probably.
This was all the way back in 2017 when the game had way more pallets, faster gens, insta-heals, insta-blinds, bigger maps, infinite loops, brand new parts would instantly complete the entire gen, survivors could blink at pallets, and sprint burst would regen while sprinting.
This is the kind of stuff when I hear this that you guys who like I am very lucky to have a wonderful group of people that watch me that are both brand new to the game and have been playing since back 2016-17. And I'm very appreciative to have such like a vast group of people with vastly different experiences in this game. But when you guys say that like old DBD was better, and I hear all this stuff, better for whom is the question. Better for whom? Because this sounds awful. This sounds terrible. It's like almost like this weird kind of like, I don't know. It's like this weird kind of like, what? It's like a beautiful lie. You know, it's just like, oh, well, old DBD was sunshine and rainbows and everything was fun back then. And then like, and then I hear this stuff. And it's like nobody ever talks about this, right? Nobody ever talks about BT working for both people or being able to recover sprint burst while running or having like, you know, infinite setups everywhere. You know, it's like you leave this stuff out, right? You leave this stuff out. You don't talk about this stuff. It's always just like DBD was better back then, but you don't bring up this stuff that was objectively terrible and objectively not good for the game. I hate that narrative so much.
So dealing with 3 entire health states on top of all this was not a welcome addition for killers. Truth be told, in normal gameplay, borrowed time didn't typically disrupt the game too much. The thing that pushed borrowed time far into the realm of problem perk territory was the cursed 3 words, survive with friends.
Yep.
Now, just to clarify, I am not one of those people who hate Survive with Friends and blames all the game's issues on it, but the era of Dead by Daylight we're talking about in this video is one of the core reasons pre-mades get so much hate even to this day. This was the era of Bully Squads, teams of 4 survivors on comms who knew full well the game was a survivor's paradise back then and fully intended to exploit everything they could to experience crazy power trips. Matches against these types of teams could only be described as absolute hell. Every chase would be an instant swing.
And this is why I feel like people that say 2016-17 DBD, like old DBD was good, like they're always referencing this little zone between 2016 and 2018. Sometimes some people go into 2019 just a little bit, but most people reference 2016 to 2018 DBD as like their god zone of happiness. Excuse me, just inhaled air. But you know who I always see saying this? It's always my friends who main Survivor. It's always my friends who main Survivor. I have never, ever had a friend who played Killer back then tell me that. I have never known somebody who played Killer back then tell me that. It's always been my Survivor friends who tell me that. My friends who have made Survivor ever since like back then. They're always the ones saying that. I've never caught a Killer player saying that ever. Literally ever. Small exception for Billy Mains probably, yeah, because he was actually good back then. Then again, he was actually kind of like, he had some BS stuff. He kind of had like blight level add-ons that were really frustrating. So yeah, but in general, I've never, not even in general, like I've never asked even like a Billy main, like, hey, you know, was the game as a whole better? Not like my specific killer, but was the game as a whole better back then? And it's like, killer players don't say that. It's always this. I always hear, you know, survivor players say that.
Burst straight to 6 safe pallets. Every time you should get a hit, boom, they teleported to the other side of the pallet. Meanwhile, you've lost 1 gen immediately to a brand new part, and once you finally get that first hit, insta-heal. Once again, syringes didn't take 8 to 16 seconds back then, it healed you the same frame it was used. And of course, don't forget the teabagging and emoting at every single pallet. And don't even think about switching targets. Every other survivor on the team was capable of the exact same stuff, so you'd only waste more time traveling across the map than if you just committed to that one survivor. And once you finally get the survivor down, boom, decisive strike, which was still in its prime, which meant it had no timer and was active at all times. Eventually you might down them again, but this time they've gone down in the open, which means no walls nearby for you to counter flashlights with.
Yep.
That's right, flashlights save time. Except they didn't even have to time the flashlight save because of insta-blind add-ons, which did exactly what it sounds like. As soon as they point that beamer at you, you're blinded immediately. Pain. So much pain.
So why is old DBD better then? Was it really just a bully simulator for Survivor? Is that what people are literally referencing at all times? Is that literally it? Is it literally just people just like missing being able to bully everybody? Not every survivor bullied? Because this sounds awful. This sounds terrible. Like, all of this sounds awful. I would not want to play back then. I would not want to play back then if that was the case. Because this sounds terrible. This sounds like it would be like, you know, like pulling teeth to play killer back then. Like we just had a really chill day. We had like a frustrating match, which was that pyramid head match, and that was it. Like we had a pretty chill day, and we didn't use slowdown besides like one build request, and that was like one, right? We didn't use slowdown all day, and we had tons of fun today. I don't think I would want to play back then with all of this. This sounds miserable. Literally bullied or bullied. That's what it sounds like. That doesn't sound like a kind of game I would want to play for killer. This sounds pretty terrible. No chat filter. Yeah, that. Not that the chat filter right now is a helpful thing, but yeah, it does block out some of the more awful stuff. Yeah, that just, I don't know, man. This just doesn't sound like the utopia that everybody describes to me all the time about, like, I wish DBD was back like this. This does not sound like a utopia.
Not to mention that most maps had infinite loops. If the bully squad knew that map's infinite, you might as well quit, because nobody other than Nurse could physically do anything. At this point in time, Bloodlust wasn't even in the game yet, but when it eventually did get added, some of these infinite loops were that insane that even Bloodlust couldn't help. Usually because the infinite would have lots of line of sight breaks, which would just stop the Bloodlust gain entirely. Inevitably, 3 to 4 survivors would still be alive when the gates are powered, and you've just managed to get another hook. It ain't much, but it's honest work. Now it's Borrowed Time's time to shine. All 4 of these survivors would be running Borrowed Time and would have no issues whatsoever with running up to the hook and bum rushing right in front of you. This means 4 coordinated players body blocking each other, 2 of which with additional health states, all making a beeline for the exit gates, both of which were already wide open, as endgame collapse wasn't a thing yet and neither was Blood Warden, so no need to 99 the doors.
Old DBD was better, haha!
Even if by some miracle you downed any of them, you're going to be hit with
okay? No, I'm just like, I don't know, like, I love my friends a lot. God bless them. I appreciate them so much. But so many of them say this to me, it's just like, no, Brand, trust me. If you had played back in the good old days of DBD, you would have had so much more fun. Everything was so much better. And every time I go and watch one of these videos with you guys, where they're just like bluntly honest about all the stuff that used to exist in this game, I'm like, oh, it really wasn't that great, was it? It was? How is all this stuff that they're saying this? I would hate this. What is the better part? What is the better part? I hear all of this. It sounds terrible. You actually have to play it to understand, not just watch a video? What do I have to play about, like, half the stuff I'm hearing? What do I have to play? Like, how would that, like, and then, oh my god, no, now I'm gonna have BT, and now we both have health states, and even if you do anything, if I slug you, it's unbreakable, and if I don't, it's DS, and like, how is this better? Players weren't nearly as good back then, but, like, here's the problem. Here's the problem. Over time, it would get terrible. Even that, like, logic of, like, oh, well, people weren't good back then, and people would get good. Over time. Just because it's not bad at a certain point doesn't mean it won't be. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's still a bad formula that's going to grow out of control. The less annoying stuff, but that's what I'm saying is I'm hearing a lot of annoying stuff right now. You say there's less annoying stuff, but I'm also hearing a lot of annoying stuff. And it's not even just like the Survivor side of things. Like, there's like, you know, like 7 Blink Nurse, and like we were talking about Crack barely earlier. Like, there's a lot of stuff that was also annoying. It just sounds like different kinds of annoying. It doesn't sound like 2016 to 2018 DBD was like the golden land. It just sounds like I traded like different problems for different problems that are slightly not as bad. I don't know, man.
A decisive strike, an insta-blind, or even if you hook them, another proc of borrowed time. Of course you can't slug them because you know damn well they had Unbreakable.
Yeah, that's what I was
It was a
saying.
nightmare. Every single match with these players would have been decisive strike, borrowed time, Unbreakable on all 4 of them, and then maybe self-care or object or something else for the last slot. No matter what you do, they have a counter that nullifies it. To sum it up, borrowed time always ended up serving as one last kick in the balls after an already horrible experience. While borrowed
You know what's funny? This is something I didn't even like realize until like right this second, to be honest. There was squads that I knew, like groups of people that I knew, like not like personally, but like I would play kill like before like MMR and stuff. Like there were groups of people I would know that would like I was like, okay, I would see them in a lobby, and I knew they were a 3 or a 4 man because I had checked their friends list. I knew they played together. I knew they were a 3 or 4 man, and they would be like tryhards. They would like, you know, every match it was like dead hard DS Unbreakable, like it was the whole deal, right? Like, and I saw those groups all the time, and I knew I was in for a bad match, but I was still learning the game, so I played against them because I wanted to improve, and it was always like a really rough time. And like, you know, I would win every once in a while, but mostly I was just getting dumpstered. I was getting out perked, right? I don't see those groups anymore. I don't see them. And I didn't realize that till like just this moment. I can't think of like one name that I play and I recognize anymore. I don't see these groups anymore. I don't see like the 3 or 4 man running full meta and like trying to blast me out of the water. I haven't seen a group like that in so long that like, you know, I ran into frequently, you know? I don't remember the last time I ran into a group like that. And it makes me think like, did they balance it to the point where like that bully mechanism, like that bully, like the bully squad mentality is just like dwindling? So like their interest was like, oh, well, we only liked it when we could just have this overwhelming power over you and just dumpster people. And those players quit because they couldn't do that anymore. Because I can't even remember the last time I fought a group like that I actually recognized in no sweats. Like, I can't remember the last time that's happened. And it didn't even occur to me until just now that that's a thing. That's crazy.
Time was certainly not quite as bad as Decisive Strike, it still offered an absurd level of safety that survivors really had no business having. A whopping 7 months after its release, on the 14th of September 2017, Borrowed Time would receive its first nerf. Nerf. The activation window was reduced from 20 seconds down to 15. Nerf. The bleed out timer was reduced from 40 seconds down to 25. These nerfs were actually fairly sizable, and with the bleed out timer being reduced by such a drastic amount, it was now somewhat viable to just chase the survivor until the timer runs out. Sure, it was still a pretty sizable hit to the killer's pressure, but it was nowhere near as monumental of a hit as before. That being said, these nerfs took the perk even further in the wrong direction.
Man, I can't DC against Pinhead anymore. It's so sad.
Made it so the killer's best option was just to tunnel the unhooked survivor instead of the unhooker. The reduced bleed out timer further incentivized disregarding the unhooker, since the unhooked victim would automatically drop dead soon anyway. While borrowed time was far from dead, it did make it less useful in normal gameplay.
That's so sad.
But unfortunately, it had almost zero effect on bully squads, as once again, the doors would already be open and that's when they'd release their onslaught of BTs, and you can certainly get to a door in 25
Onslaught of BTs,
seconds.
what a sentence.
There was a whole 7 months of people abusing it before the nerf, meaning behavior had plenty of time to assess the situation
She's throwing
and
a lot
come
of
up with
ballots really
appropriate
early.
ideas, yet it still remained a problem perk even after its nerf. If anything, it made it more of a problem perk since it was less useful in standard gameplay, meaning one of the main uses of this perk was now just bullying killers. Things needed to change. Borrowed Time's next set of changes came with the release of patch 1.9.2 on the 19th of February 2018, another 5 entire months after its previous nerf.
These were the golden years.
Borrowed Time would now only apply to the unhooked survivor. Buff. Borrowed Time now had unlimited uses. Finally, Borrowed Time now—
I think that's an interesting point that Red said earlier, because it sounds like a lot of like was DBD actually in a good place, or were people just bad? Is that what I'm hearing? Because the more I think about that, the more this makes sense. Was DBD in a healthy spot, or were people just bad at the game still? Did we just not have people with thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of hours who just knew what to do? Because it sounds like that's really what's happening, is you just like didn't have people in mass, I guess would be the clarification there. People in a majority of people who knew how to abuse these things. That's what it sounds like. It doesn't sound like the actual like mechanics, the perk strengths, the map balance. It doesn't sound like any of that was better. It just sounds like people weren't good enough at the game yet to abuse it consistently, or have a majority of people be able to have access to abusing those things. So it just placebo affected itself and feels better even though it's not. Take the people, like think about it, take the people that have played the game since the beginning, like now, or like close to it. So like people with like 8,000 hours, 9,000 hours, 10,000 hours. Take those people and like put them into that meta. Like that old meta that was really oppressive. Put them into that old meta, put them in there, and it feels like they would just like blow up the game. It doesn't feel like or sound like it would work. So it's basically sounds like most of old DBD's like sanctity or like balance lied on the fact that people just weren't good yet. Which would make sense as to why, like, you know, people see it so fondly.
Now actually functioned as an anti-tunnel perk and can no longer be abused by bully squads to guarantee escapes late game. And it only took 1 year, but now a new problem arose. The perk still retained its previous values of a 15-second activation window with a 25-second bleed out timer. So killers who wanted to tunnel didn't have to wait too long for that bleed out timer to expire, with the survivor immediately dropping to the floor. Once again, the timer did not pause at all, so all the killer had to do was follow you for 25 seconds and then claim another free hook. That being said, the perk now certainly disincentivized tunneling to some extent, as the unhooker no longer had a third health state to burn through, so now going for the unhooker was actually feasible. While it would be another entire year for Decisive Strike to finally be balanced, the loss of the two-man borrowed time let killers breathe a huge sigh of relief. It goes without saying though, borrowed time didn't need to be quite as weak as it had become. It had become an anti-tunnel perk that didn't really prevent tunneling for very long. Some slight buffs were definitely needed. Luckily, after the release of the Legion on the 18th of December 2018, Borrowed Time would receive a vital buff, the addition of Deep Wounds. Instead of Borrowed Time having its own arbitrary timer system, it would now be unified using the Legion's new mechanic. This was a vital change because Deep Wounds timer would pause indefinitely whenever the survivor was in a chase with the killer. This change was 10 entire months after its previous changes. Wow. And although Borrowed Time was far from dead and was still decent, it definitely should have received something sooner than this. That being said, Borrowed Time was certainly not perfected yet. Or, more accurately, Deep Wounds weren't perfected yet. Keen viewers may have noticed that I said the timer pauses when in a chase with the killer, not while sprinting. While this might not sound like that big of a difference, it certainly could be
Oh
in
yeah, it
certain
was.
scenarios.
Oh yeah, it was.
The chase mechanic as a whole was never perfect and still isn't to this very day, so it would sometimes just not.
You saw us playing that today. Like, we were playing Trickster in that one Trickster match. We'd be like right behind the survivor, and like we wouldn't be in chase with them. Like, we would literally be right behind them, and chase wasn't activating for some reason. It was the weirdest thing. So having deep wounds work off of something that finicky sounds terrifying, and I'm sorry for all of you that had to go through that.
Register the survivor as being in a chase with the killer, even when they blatantly were, leading to the perk to sometimes function exactly like it used to, with the timer just going down anyway. Additionally, some crafty killer players would chase deep wounded survivors while looking backwards to intentionally stop the game from registering them as in chase. These caveats caused Borrowed Time's effectiveness to vary wildly each time it was used, whether it be due to bugs or cheeky killers. And in typical behavior fashion, this issue with Borrowed Time and by nature the Legion's entire ability would receive changes. After another year, so on the 3rd of December 2019, Deep Wounds would finally be adjusted to abandon the buggy chase mechanic entirely and instead just pause when a survivor is sprinting. This is likely the version of Borrowed Time most of you are familiar with. Killers could no longer just follow the survivor until they automatically dropped dead, as the timer would pause whenever the survivor was sprinting. So if killers were really that desperate to tunnel, they'd have to work for it. At this point, Borrowed Time was in a great spot, but it still wasn't quite perfected yet. Over the years, behavior would reduce the Deep Wounds timer by 5 seconds and gradually reduce the activation window from 20 seconds down to 12, but none of those really had much of an impact. However, with many more stealth killers being added to the game over the years, a new issue cropped up. Borrowed Time simply didn't work against most stealth killers. Remember, this entire time—
You guys remember fighting Forever Freddy and bringing your BT, and the moment you saw the clock on the screen, you were like, oh, oops. My zoom in button is tied to that. But yeah, remember you would like, you bring in, okay, move, make booty. You remember bringing BT and you get a Forever Freddy and you would just like see the clock start going down and you're just like, oh man, oh no. Remember how awful that was? You remember like you would see somebody get hooked across the map, go to save them, and the pig would just uncrouch from behind the hook and just knock you down. Or knock them down and then knock you down. You remember that? That was awful. That was one of the worst things I could have ever... That I was around for and actively played. And oh my god, was it one of the worst things. I remember being so frustrated at that. So frustrated at that. Like, ugh, that was absolutely terrible. Where were we at?
Entire time, the perk would only activate if the unhook happened within the killer's terror radius. So killers like the Wraith and the Pig could stop the perk from activating entirely by removing their terror radiuses. Once the community as a whole caught wind of this, of course there was an influx of Wraiths turbo camping and turbo tunneling. It wasn't a huge influx because, let's be honest, nobody's itching to play as Wraith or Pig, but there was certainly a wave of it. So on the 4th of May 2021, Borrowed Time was buffed to activate on every unhook no matter what, regardless of terror radius. At this point, Borrowed Time was, in my opinion, perfected. Even if you wouldn't quite call it perfect, it was in a good enough spot for the community to welcome it with open arms when it would eventually be made base kit on all survivors, with the perk itself simply adding 10 seconds to the activation window, which is where we're at today. I hope you enjoyed the video and thank you so much for sticking to the end. I've noticed that now that I've seen some success with this style of video, a bunch of other people have now started doing the same thing. At the end of the day, that's completely fine. Nobody can own a video style, but I'm just putting it out there that if somebody else makes a video like this on a different topic, that's not going to remove the topic from my table. I've been working my arse off on YouTube for 6 years with no success, so now that I'm finally getting somewhere, I'm not going to let copycats stop my momentum. Once again though, no hate to the people following my steps, no one can own a video style. I'm just saying that I don't want people calling me a copycat down the line. I was doing
What?
this first. Thanks for watching and take care.
What? Oh, okay, that got kind of weird at the end, huh? Yeah. Yeah, I got kind of weird at the end, didn't it? He kind of like got up and like puffed his chest like, I am the alpha. was kind of weird, huh? That was a little interesting. that was a little uncomfortable. That was something. Yeah. That was, hi Tori, how's it going? Yeah, that was something. That was really weird way to end the video. Really weird way to end the video. I was like, that was a really good informative video on the history of BT and where it's at now. And then he's like, don't you copy my videos. I'm not angry. I'm just letting you know who the daddy is. I'm like, oh man, just take it easy. Whoa. Just take it easy, man. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like, it's weird stuff like that I feel, oh, hello. It's like weird stuff like that I hear about, and I just like, you know, very I will find you vibes, yeah. It's just like weird stuff like that like, when I hear things like that, it's just like, you know, I'm thankful for the way the game is now, which is not something I get to say very often, right? Because, you know, we're obviously really, really caught up in like the, you know, we're really caught up in like the, you know, the day-to-day. We're worried about like Nurse still being annoying, Blight being annoying, Alkring being annoying, Spirit still having mother-daughtering. We get caught up a lot in like that sort of stuff, right? But like, you know, if you take a step back and you go into a video like that and you watch it and you see all the stuff that used to be in the game, it's like, you know, like we actually have it, and we're actually in a pretty good spot. We're in a pretty okay place. Could things be better? Of course. I feel like they always can be. They always can be. But I feel like we're in a pretty good spot. Things are pretty alright. So, yeah, we should, you know, probably be a little bit more thankful for the game being in the state that it's in. And not necessarily, like, I don't know, looking the gift horse in the mouth.